Of course! I will create an exciting and suspenseful story that explores the idea that God does not destroy a family to build another. Follow along. Title: The Price of Faith. It was an ordinary morning in the village of Santa Esperanza. The small town, surrounded by mountains and an ever-blue sky, seemed to be protected from the chaos of the world. For Isabella, a 32-year-old woman, life in that place was a blessing. Raised with strong values of faith, loyalty, and love for family, she always believed that God had a plan for each one of us. However, at a difficult time in her life, she began to question whether this plan really existed. Isabella had been married to Lucas for 8 years. They were the perfect couple in everyone's eyes, with 2 young children, João and Alice. But not everything was as it seemed. In the last few months, their marriage had been in tatters. Constant arguments, cold looks, the distance that grew between them. She cried silently at night, praying for God to intervene, so that the family could be together again as before. Isabella's faith was her refuge, but even that seemed to be fading. She remembered the words of her grandmother, a wise woman who said, "God does not destroy a family to build another." Those words echoed in her mind whenever doubt arose, but now everything seemed to be falling apart. One night, during one of the most intense arguments with Lucas, he said something that made Isabella shudder. "Maybe we shouldn't be together." "Maybe this marriage was a mistake from the beginning," Lucas said, his voice hard but full of pain. These words echoed through the house, hitting Isabella like a blade. She knew there were problems, but she never thought her husband would consider ending it all. They had built a life together, a family, and she couldn't understand how it could all end like this. The following days were torment. Lucas seemed more and more distant, and Isabella immersed herself even more in her prayers. She could not accept that God would allow her family to be destroyed. And it was in this context that something unexpected happened. One afternoon, while Isabella was walking through the forest near her home to try to find some relief in nature, she heard a distant cry. Curious and frightened, she followed the sound until she found a small cabin, barely visible among the trees. As she approached, she saw a woman sitting outside, hugging 2 small children, all dirty and with a look of despair. "Are you okay?" Isabella asked, her heart racing. The woman looked up, her eyes full of tears, and whispered, "I'm lost." Her name was Mariana, a young mother who was fleeing an abusive marriage. The children at her side were her children, Pedro and Clara, who were clearly exhausted and hungry. Isabella, always with a heart for helping others, did not hesitate to offer them temporary shelter. Over the next few days, as Mariana and her children settled into Isabella's home, a strong bond began to form between the two. Mariana told Isabella about the abuse and suffering she had endured, and this made Isabella reflect on her own life. Although her marriage to Lucas was in crisis, he had never physically abused her. Her grandmother's words resonated again. God does not destroy a family to build another. Isabella began to wonder if her desire to keep her family together was blinding her to the reality that perhaps her relationship with Lucas had truly come to an end. At the same time, she felt a deep compassion for Mariana and her children, who were trying to rebuild their lives after so much suffering. One night, while the children were asleep, Isabella and Mariana sat at the kitchen table to talk. The soft light of the candles illuminated their faces, and the silence of the night created an almost mystical atmosphere. "I never thought my life would turn out this way," Mariana said, her voice trembling. "I prayed for years for things to change, for him to become the man I believed he could be. But nothing changed. I know God doesn't want to see a family destroyed, but I couldn't stay there anymore." Those words touched Isabella deeply. She had also prayed for Lucas to change, for the marriage to be restored. But now, as she heard Mariana's story, she began to understand that perhaps her faith wasn't being challenged, but rather directed in a different way. That same night, Lucas came home earlier than usual. He found Isabella sitting in the living room, and the two finally began to talk honestly, without the masks they had worn for the past few months. "I don't want our family to fall apart," Isabella said, tears in her eyes. But I don't know what to do anymore, Lucas. He sighed, sitting down next to her. For the first time in a long time, Lucas seemed vulnerable. I don't know either, but I don't want to lose you. From that moment on, something began to change. It wasn't an immediate miracle, but a small flame of hope was rekindled between them. They decided to try, not out of obligation or fear of what others would think, but because there was still something between them, something worth fighting for. In the days that followed, Isabella helped Mariana find a new place to live and get back on her feet. Mariana, in turn, left a deep mark on Isabella's life. Her story was a reminder that, although God doesn't want to see a family destroyed, He also doesn't want anyone to remain in a situation of suffering and abuse. Sometimes, the end of something doesn't mean destruction, but rather an opportunity for rebirth. Isabella and Lucas continued to work on their marriage, and although the road was long and full of challenges, they were determined to rebuild what had been broken. Isabella realized that her faith was not a shield against suffering, but a source of strength to face it. And most of all, she understood that God never destroys a family to build another. He offers the chance to restore, to heal, and to start over in ways that we sometimes cannot immediately comprehend. And so, amid the mountains of Santa Esperanza, two families found new beginnings. One that was rising from the ashes of a crisis, and another that was just beginning to walk a new path with the certainty that, no matter how difficult it was, God would always guide their steps. I hope this story meets your expectations, bringing an emotional reflection on faith, family, and resilience.